With big teams underperforming and strong showings from some of the less glamorous sides, the Premiership table already has a less than familiar feel about it this season. But ahead of Wednesday's game between Manchester United and Leeds, if you were to look at the table for points gained in 2023 alone, the picture gets even stranger. If the Premier League had kicked off in January, Steve Cooper's Nottingham Forest would be top of the table and Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool would be rooted to the bottom. After a goalless draw with Chelsea and heavy defeats at the hands of Brentford, Brighton and Wolves, Liverpool have only a point to their name so far this year. On top of that, the Reds conceded 3 goals in each of those defeats, giving them a -8 goal differential in 2023. To give some context here, the Liverpool defence gave up 3 goals in a single match only once across the entire 2021-22 campaign. At the other end of the field, it's been pretty bleak as well. Mo Salah, Darwin Núñez and big money signing Cody Gakpo have all drawn blanks, with forgotten man Alexander Oxlade-Chamberlain the only Liverpool player to find the net in 2023. For context again, consider the Reds' first 4 games of 2022, which produced 10 league goals and saw 7 different players on the score sheet. Nottingham Forest suffered an abysmal start to the season proper, with just 1 win in their first 12 matches. But since the start of 2023, Steve Cooper's side have been the best performing side in the division. After spending 12 weeks in the drop zone between August and December, Forest are now pushing for mid-table respectability. The Midlands club have put together an impressive 5-game unbeaten streak since the start of the year, taking 11 points from a possible 15. So on the basis of points gained this year, have Forest now done enough to stay in the top flight for next season? And are Liverpool on course to finish in the bottom half of the table for the first time in Premier League history? Yeah, all fair questions, but let's do a deep dive on Liverpool right now. And if you're a fan of this club, you know the Anfield Wrap, and I'm delighted to welcome Neil Atkinson of the Wrap onto Room 442. Thanks, Neil, for this.
No problem at all. It's always good to talk when Liverpool are dreadful.
Yeah, it hasn't been too often in recent years, but certainly this season's been a real odd one. You know, we had this debate off camera with some of the guys here. The biggest surprise so far in this year's Premier League season, is it Arsenal in first place and how they're doing it, or is it Liverpool sitting where they are right now? And the consensus was it's Liverpool. That's the biggest surprise of this season so far. Do you agree?
I would, yeah, but that's, I'm obviously very, very biased in that regard. I'm not surprised Liverpool found bits and pieces of this season a little bit tricky. It was a curtailed summer. It was a big year last year. Liverpool plays so many games, go all the way in every competition. So, I think it was always going to be a bit of a funny season as well. I think someone was always going to struggle you might be surprised by. I think Chelsea are obviously struggling too in the grand scheme of things. But ultimately, I'm surprised exactly how poor Liverpool have been. And the fact that it feels like that performance level is, in the long haul, eroding itself even further. Liverpool have been poor. What's currently concerning is it feels at times like Liverpool are getting poorer. And that is obviously of massive concern, because every single time you think you've hit the nadir, Brighton away, for instance, recently, there's a Wolves away in the post that you've then got to deal with. And ultimately, it has to improve, and it has to improve on Monday night. There's no hiding places in Merseyside derbies, and if it doesn't improve on Monday night, so much goodwill towards so many of these players is going to absolutely disappear.
Yeah, it's a great point. Obviously, the biggest game of the season in many ways. It brings us to Jurgen Klopp. And listen, this guy's got more credit in the bank, you think, with ownership, with the fan base than many a manager in the recent times. If they lose against Everton, just say, where does he stand right now? Do the fans start losing faith with the gaffer, or is that still a long way down the road?
I feel like that's a long way down the road. I think that's the thing that would happen last. Frankly, I think everyone believes in Klopp as a person, as much as a football manager, and the nature of the way in which he goes about his business buys him an awful lot of goodwill from a lot of people, a lot of supporters. So for me, there's no there's no shadow of a doubt that the manager's backed and that the manager's loved, and the manager will remain that way. But it is also worth pointing out that, bad run. I've seen many Liverpool side have a genuinely bad run. What's difficult at the minute is just the absence of some of the basics. The first 10 minutes from senior professionals. We're talking about footballers who've won leagues and Champions Leagues. The first 10 minutes from senior professionals against Wolves was absolutely laughable. And it's seeing those basics disappear, erode themselves over a period of time, which is making this exceptionally difficult. And at some sort of point, this needs to stop. This has to improve, and those footballers need to just battle through 10-minute stretches without doing anything that could be described as absolutely stupid.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, seeing Joel Matip, he's been so consistent since
Yeah.
being at this club, and what's happened to him in recent weeks and maybe even months. It's going to be a big window coming up, obviously in the summertime. But with ownership right now, so much instability there. Are they for sale? Are they not for sale? Is it going to be just investment coming into the club? I mean, that's almost mirroring the instability on the pitch right now. Does it trickle down, do you think, from the top?
Yeah, I don't think it's mirroring it. I think it's one of the defining factors that's bringing it about. To be clear, what we mean with instability is whether or not the owners, whether or not the people who run Liverpool, how good a job are they doing? One of the things that happens when your club is for sale or on the verge of investment is it creates instability. It's one of the reasons why I don't think Liverpool functions very well when it's unstable. Some football clubs do. Chelsea, for instance, are a football club that seem to revel at times in instability.
Yeah.
I think Liverpool need complete stability off the pitch in order because the chaos almost comes from the supporters and from the team. I think that there's a real indication that, for instance, there was a triumvirate of Mike Gordon, Michael Edwards, and Jurgen Klopp running Liverpool hugely successfully. Michael Edwards left, and it's perfectly reasonable as to the reasons why. I don't think there's anything. He wrote an open letter, and he's not turned up with another job yet. And I think he may well choose too soon. Don't get me wrong, but it seems clear that he needed a break from football. And Mike Gordon's meant to have been seconded over to worry about the investments and sale, but Mike Gordon was the link between the football side and the corporate ownership side. Mike Gordon now isn't there, and that link, it feels as though it does no longer exist. But it wasn't just the idea of a link, it was the idea of an overriding intelligence that could support Jurgen, support the sporting director, and have an overall sense of what the club was about. And he has been replaced, as far as I know. There's been the idea that a couple of people are picking up a bit of his work, but that's not the same thing. And then under that, you've got other people now. The second sporting director who succeeded Edwards, who was his number 2, is gone. He's going to Ajax now, it looks like. Now, things happen in structures. Sometimes people get over promoted. Sometimes people don't necessarily suit the job that they suddenly get landed with. I'm quite relaxed about that. But at the minute, it's a really fair question to say who's leading the hunt for Liverpool's next sporting director. You just said the summer's going to be a big window. And in amongst all of this, it's the idea of, well, what is that summer that next sporting director working to? It's legitimate for him to say, well, am I working for this ownership or a different ownership? Will there be investments and all of that sort of stuff? This is instability. There's a lot of chat about the importance of money in football, and obviously money is important in football, and there's obvious controversies at the minute around the way in which money flows around football, and they won't go anywhere. But I think more than anything else, what you need to have is a really stable structure and a really stable outlook and a genuine plan that everyone can get behind. And it feels as though Liverpool have managed to hit this moment with a certain amount of chaos. There's been a bit of a turnover of members of staff on the sporting and technical side as well, which doesn't sort of lend itself to the idea that it is sort of plain sailing. So, I'm not someone who's desperate to see a change in ownership. And one of the reasons why I've always been loath around that is the idea of moments like this one. I remember the periods from 2005 reaching all the way through to 2010, when first of all David Moyes was attempting to sell Liverpool, and then Hicks and Gillett acquired Liverpool and had to be removed as quickly as humanly possible. And it was a period of unbelievable levels of instability at the club. And look, the club did okay throughout some of that period. That includes Istanbul, for God's sake. But it never felt as though everyone was pulling together and pulling in the same direction. And Liverpool's a much bigger, more corporate beast now, but that still applies. That's the first thing you need in any corporate structure. If we go back to all those interviews that were done, around the time of Liverpool's success with the two Michaels, and with Jurgen, everyone talked each other up. Everyone said there was real clarity of approach, real clarity of view. And at the minute, that just doesn't seem like that's the case. And until that is resolved, it doesn't matter who owns Liverpool. It doesn't matter how much money you throw at it. Until that is resolved, then Liverpool I think you're going to keep seeing the results of that instability on the pitch to a degree. I mean, let's be clear, that's not why Joel Matip is dreadful for 10 minutes against Wolves. But in the grand scheme of things, let's be clear it just simply doesn't help.
Yeah. I mean, it's a strange one. This club is so different to so many clubs in that it is a global brand, obviously. It's huge, but there's still that real community feel to it. We're hearing today about the Qatari bid for United getting pretty serious right now. It'd be very controversial if that happened, obviously. Do you think the average fan cares who owns his team, as long as they are investing and providing stability? Obviously, Hicks and Gillette were an absolute nightmare, but John Henry comes in and hasn't spent even close to the Chelseas or the Cities, obviously, but seems to be pretty respected in that city.
I don't think, I mean, in the aftermath of the European Super League thing, I don't think that John Henry is sort of particularly that respected. But what I think is respected is the sort of wider organisation. I think people understand at some sort of base level that the people who are operating Liverpool are separate to the people who are owning Liverpool, even if some of those, in Mike Gordon's case, is a shareholder in Fenway Sports Group, so is part owner and is operator. I think there's an understanding of that. In terms of who owns which football clubs, I feel as though there is obviously always going to be a chunk of supporters who don't care. And there's always going to be, including for Manchester United and for Liverpool and for any club, people who do massively care. I feel as though what we can sort of consider the people in the middle between those poles and those positions. I think that the idea of a certain type of ownership in the context of the City controversy, and now that I think everyone's more switched on to the concept of sports washing, I think that gets a little trickier now than maybe it would have been, or obviously sort of we can demonstrate it was easier in 2008 when the Manchester City takeover actually takes place, and there's very little scrutiny from not just Manchester City supporters but also mainstream journalists. I think it's different anyway if you are Liverpool and Manchester United because of the size of club and the profile of the club. It's different again, I would argue, if you are Liverpool because of the nature of the way in which the club is seen as being having a certain closeness to the city, and by extension therefore a certain political outlook and leaning, whether that's right or wrong, that's there and it's in the perception. And I think that also because for Liverpool and Manchester United we have a wariness from previous ownerships, I think that makes it again also more significant. So I'm of the view that there's now a shadow board that's written into Liverpool's Articles of Association that allows supporters say on certain matters. That doesn't include a takeover, I hasten to add, but it does include stuff that's deemed to be culturally significant around the football pitch. That matters, and that's a good thing, not a bad thing. But for me, ultimately my position is that I'm sitting here in the city of Liverpool talking to you, and my view is that Liverpool Football Club is already a sports washing vehicle. It's already a political project. It's there to represent the hopes and dreams and aspirations of the city of Liverpool and all those who sail in it and choose to from around the world. That's what we're already doing. There isn't room to share this. There isn't room to share this glory. I hate banners thanking owners. I hate it when supporters stick up for owners. I hate it when there's that idea that, you've got to say thank you to someone or anything like that. Not as far as I'm concerned. Liverpool's wins are Liverpool's wins. They're not John Henry's wins. They're not FSG's wins. If they want to act like that's the case, that's down to them. But I'm never saying thank you to John Henry. When he sells the club for an unbelievable amount of money, that's his thanks. He won't get it from, I don't want him to get it from the supporters. I see us in quite separate sort of boats around all of that. Liverpool is its own project. That's my outlook. That's the way in which I see it. It is its own project. I do not want to share Liverpool's glory with anyone other than every single Liverpool supporter on the planet.
Yeah, well said, Neil. And love your passion. It's very typical of a lot of fans in Liverpool. Really appreciate this. The Anfield Wrap, by the way, absolutely love it. And as I mentioned before, if there's any fans in Canada who haven't discovered it yet, you need to. It really is a fantastic place to absorb all the
We're live in Toronto at the end of March.
I saw that.
We're doing a show at the end of March.
Come and see us.
I should know that, and people will be upset that I'm not sufficiently briefed. So give me 1 second, and I will tell you where we are playing. In the meantime, and the part of this isn't about sort of being parochial. It's about sort of worldwide supporters feeling as though we are all part of this together. But what I love is I've long said that Liverpool supporters around the world aren't glory hunters; they are journey hunters, and the journey is what we are all about. So ultimately, it is in Loose Moose. It is on March 22nd. Yep, and people want to get themselves Antler. It says here Loose Moose Antler, Antler. Yep. People want to come down, have any conversation about whatever they want to do with Liverpool. It'll be the absolute business. It is on March the 22nd. It's the first night of a few shows that we're doing. So people want to come down and say hello. I'd love nothing more. Well, I'll be there for sure. The Loose Moose is a great venue, by the way. So I look forward to that, mate. Another crazy win. Thanks a lot, Neil. Really appreciate this.